Okay, boys and girls, in this video you will see visually how to do a graph and how to copy and paste. In your data set, or in your Excel, you have been given phase 2 and continent data. What you need to do, since you already have your x-axis given to you, you will choose between GDP, which measures the total value of your country, in other words, the economy of your country, or you can choose GDP per citizen, which measures the average income, the average value that every citizen produces. You do not, and I'll say this twice, you do not have to do both. You only have to choose one. So to take an example, I will go to continent data and we will look for a potential statistic that might interest us. Maybe, and this is a very good recommendation, if you're comparing GDP, all of GDP composition would be positives and pretty strong correlations. And most things within your economy will also provide strong positive or negative correlations, because GDP is the best measurement of a country's economy. For this example, I'm going to take let's see, so we've got ease of doing business. This is a good one. The labor force that's in services. That means the people that work in Domino's, the people that work in delivery, the people that work as a barista. It is people that work in a servicio. Yeah? In order to copy, you have to click Control-C. It's the only way that you can do it in Google Sheets. Unfortunately, Microsoft owns a couple of algorithms, so you can only do Control-C. You move over and you can test either one of the variables. Let's test it against GDP. Negative 0.665, not too strong. Let's maybe test it against the income of citizens. 0.88. Now that's a very strong correlation. And as you can see, the equation for your slope and the equation for your intercept will already be calculated. So, if we're happy with that, and we think 0.88 is a very good strength of relationship, we're going to create a graph from it. To create a graph, we will highlight the data, only the data. I'm going to do this again. I only highlight the data. I'm going to do that again. I only highlight the data. I click on the data, and I highlight it using Shift and an arrow key. Once the data is highlighted, you click on Insert Chart. Once this loads, there we go. And under Setup, we don't want a column chart. We want a scatter plot, the topic we've been looking at. So I'm going to click on Scatter Plot, and I'm going to have to click on Switch Rows and Columns. And it's given us our rows and columns. Problem being, we do not have the x-axis or y-axis or the graphic title. To do that, we will have to click, and this is where you guys will have to play around a little bit, on Customize. On Customize. When we click on it, we can click on Chart and Axis Titles. Notice how it gives us the options of giving titles for a chart, for the horizontal axis, or for the vertical axis. So we're going to choose Chart Title and see. The chart title will always be your x-axis, your GDP per citizen, and you're going to say versus, because it's on the y-axis, versus your labor force in service. Labor force in service. I might want to center it, which I can do right here, center it. And that's the chart title. Now we need to include the horizontal axis. So we will click on horizontal axis, and then we will click right here, GDP per person. Perfect. And now, if we observe the graph, we have the x-axis given. We're going to click on vertical axis now, because we're missing that information, and say, just like our title, labor force in service. Your x-axis and your y-axis should be what's in the title. GDP per citizen versus y-axis, labor force in service. Now the requirement is that you also create a trend line. To create a trend line, we go down to series, and it gives us the option right here. So we're going to click trend line. And if we want to change the color so that it doesn't appear as the same as our data, we click color, and we've created a red color. Yeah. So there is already a graph done for us with a title, an x-axis that has been labeled, a y-axis that has been labeled. From this data, we can analyze in our data inference what it's telling us. Observe that this one bullet point right here, which is representative of country 5, is a little bit off. It's a little bit far away from the line. So that could be an element that is mentioned. Mentioning the coefficient and y, GDP, which is the income, I'm going to remind you guys, the income of your citizens, the money that they earn, versus the labor force, would be a very good interpretation to say that the more people who work in the labor force generate more money for your citizens. So there is one example of our graph. Let's do another one so that we understand the process. Here we're going to do another one, and this time we're going to go back to continent data, and we're going to take a look at some other statistics that we might want to use. Well, this one's interesting. The carbon dioxide that every country gives off, measured in million metric tons, which is a very large measurement. We will do Control-C, we will go back to phase 2, and we will copy it into, let's see, maybe GDP works. Ooh, that works, that's not too bad. Maybe it works better for GDP per citizen. Not so much, 0.69 negative. But GDP, on the other hand, 0.88, now that's a strong statistic. That means the better your economy is, the more carbon dioxide that your country gives off, because it's a positive coefficient correlation and very close to 1. So we're going to click right here on our data to create the graph, just like we did. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to click on a data point, H36. I'm going to do Shift down 1 and highlight my data. Do not highlight the country, only the numbers, because we're going to do the same process of clicking on chart type, clicking on scatter plot, and switching it from rows. I think I highlighted something wrong here. You'll notice that sometimes we might have an error where the Google Sheets, which does not work as well as Excel, I will say, does not work as well as Excel because of the algorithms. But we can click on X-axis and click on what we want for our X-axis. And in this case, GDP, H36, as we can see, is our X-axis. So we are going to click on that information and aggregate. In the event that you have problems with your scatter plot, you should always click on Series and look at what the H, 36, where the first data point is on the X for GDP, and where the bottom one is, L, 37, from reading Excel. So now that we have done that, we're going to now go back and do the same process where we go to Customize, Chart. We're going to click on Horizontal Axis, and since we have GDP as our horizontal axis, that's the one, GDP, we're going to click on that, followed by vertical, and we will do carbon CO2 emissions from energy, meaning how much carbon dioxide the country gives off from energy, from the use of energy. Some countries use oil, some countries use gas, some countries use petroleum, and some use nuclear energy. But we're still missing the chart title, so we will click on Chart Title, and then on the very top we will type in GDP versus carbon dioxide emissions. This will probably be a very strong statistic if you do your research, carbon dioxide emissions. And now that we have our chart with a x-axis and a y-axis, we still will need to create the trend line, which is in Series, followed by Trend Line with the button. And it might be a good idea just to change the color. Change the color of your trend line. Once you have it, you have the option right here to change the color into red. And wow, look at that. That is a very strong correlation right there, a very linear correlation, a very, very strong correlation. So there we have a second graph. Let us do it one more time. Okay, we're going to go down and look at this option, Economic Theory 3. And this time, let's think about it. We've used energy, we've used economy. Let's go down and look at the infrastructure of your country. The infrastructure, meaning what your country is comprised of. And I might just be curious to see if internet users, maybe you have a better economy with the more internet users. Let's check it out. Let's see, maybe the richer your citizen, right? Maybe the more internet they use. And oof, oh wow, look at that. There's a negative correlation here, and very strong negative correlation of O negative 0.88. So that's a very strong data set to choose from. We're going to highlight, but let's compare it. Maybe we want to use the other one. Not so strong in comparison. It was only 0.72, so let's stick with GDP per citizen and internet users. Now that we have that, we're going to do the same process of clicking on our data, highlighting it, highlighting our data, clicking Insert Chart, followed by going to the top and clicking not columns. We've been looking at scatter plots, not columns, but scatter plots. And if it gives it to us like this, we can sometimes click Switch Rows and Columns. Switch the rows and columns. So by doing that, we now have our data on a scatter plot. Remember, if you have a problem, you might need to click on Series to see what the problem was. Now that we have that, we will once again go to Customize. We're going to go to Chart. We're going to go to Chart and Axis Titles. And in the chart title, we're going to put what we have on the top. Exactly our x-axis versus our y-axis. So here, GDP per citizen versus internet users. You must always in your title use versus. the x-axis GDP per citizen or GDP versus your y-axis of internet users. So we have a chart title, but let's include the horizontal axis. We're going to click on horizontal axis in the same section, and here we're going to include GDP per citizen. Alright, so that's visible now, and then we're going to go to vertical axis, and we will type in internet users. Yeah, this is a very interesting statistic right here. So every country will be a little bit different. Some people might have a positive correlation here, but here we can visibly see that we have a negative correlation, And we're going to create a trend line by clicking on the thing below, series, scrolling down, clicking on trend line, and maybe changing the color, and maybe just changing the thickness of it. Yeah. And, very interesting. It appears that the more money that this continent has, the less internet users it has. Interesting. Because some countries might actually be a very positive. Some continents and other countries might have a very negative. But in this continent, for whatever reason, the more money that a citizen has, GDP per citizen, the less internet users. Very interesting. Very interesting. So, there we have it. 3 graphs. And in your groups, and you guys have groups of anywhere between 4 and 6, you guys have an example of a graph and the copy-paste element for Excel. This data inference we might want to refer to as, it appears that in this continent there is a strong negative correlation between the income of a citizen and the amount of internet users that the country has. Full stop. The slope-intercept form demonstrates that many data points have a connection, but towards the trend line, but not a conclusive trend line whereby a data point is on it. And that would be accurate because, well, there's one of them actually. What data point is this? This right here is country 309. That would be country 7. So we can say, but not a conclusive trend line whereby all data points are on it. An exception to this is country 7 that is located on the trend line. And there we go. I hope this was useful. Like I said, there's not much Excel in this, but graphs are of the eminent importance because you will be using them in your futures, not only in school, but after. If you need anything, I will be available. Just let me know. I hope this video was useful. Have a good day, everyone.